even before the Crusades, let's talk a little bit about this idea that many of these lands, and he mentions countries earlier in the clip we played earlier, but they weren't really countries; they were kingdoms and territories of the empire when this was going on. But many of them had been Christianized, and we did a whole episode the other day in part one about how Christianity spread throughout the regions of the Roman Empire. But then in northern Africa and what's now referred to as the Middle East or Levant, you get the spread of Islam. And Islam didn't exactly spread the way Christianity did it?
It did not. So Islam it emerges in the early 600s. So this is about 300 years after Constantine, and it's therefore like 300 years after the Mediterranean area becomes Christian. It comes out of Arabia, and it really has a very shocking rise. There's kind of what happened is the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire had a very long war with each other, and they were just totally exhausted by it. And suddenly these Arabs burst out, and they conquer at an incredibly rapid pace, almost nothing like it in world history. So they conquer what we think of as the Muslim world today. So they conquer modern Iraq, they conquer modern Iran, modern Egypt, modern Syria, modern North Africa. They get all the way out to Spain. And this becomes the Ummah, the Islamic world. It's initially all under one empire. It eventually breaks apart. But this area, when it was conquered, was overwhelmingly Christian. And for centuries after, it still remains heavily Christian, even majority Christian. And it's over time that you start seeing more and more aggressive limitations on Christianity in those places, and also where you see a renewed expansionism that sort of inspires a backlash against it. So, for example, one of the things that leads up to the Crusades, there's a great Christian city in Antioch. There's historically a patriarch, one of the chief bishops, lives in Antioch, and Antioch was ruled by the Roman Empire, by the Byzantine Empire, if you'll see it referred to in medieval stuff. And only a few years before the First Crusade is that city actually captured by an Islamic army, and they also conquer most of modern-day Turkey. That had been a very Christian territory, a heartland of Christianity, and it's been overrun by a Muslim army. And so the First Crusade actually emerges almost by accident, is that the Roman Emperor, Alexius I, he's asking knights from Europe, from France, say, hey, come out, help me fight against Muslims, and you can also you can feel like you're serving Christ when you fight rather than just fighting against each other. And he's trying to recruit an army for this, and what happens is the Pope at the time,
and by the way,
Urban
that Alexius, Blake, so even though he would refer to himself as the Roman emperor, he's actually in Constantinople. So he's in what we would now refer to as Byzantium.
Yes, and he's in the modern-day city of Istanbul, today a Muslim city, unfortunately, but this was the largest city in the Christian world for 1,000 years. It would be it would consider itself a rival to Rome, and it was a rival to Rome in terms of Christian importance, and that is where the emperor lived. So yeah, I say Roman emperor because technically it's true, but this would have been disputed at the time. We don't need to get into all of that, but he asks Christian knights, hey, come out and help me to reclaim lands that should be Christian. And it seems that a Pope, Urban II, he takes that and he sort of, I don't want to say distorts it, but he evolves it for his own reasons, where the church, they had this thought. Their thinking was, it's bad when Christians fight each other. There was sort of this early version of a pacifist movement where they promoted movements. They called it the peace of God and the truce of God. And the peace of God was, it's bad for Christians to fight each other, so we should try to limit when you can fight. Don't fight on Sundays, don't fight during Lent, don't fight during holy times, so that there's less fighting. And they would also do the truce of God, which was sort of early human rights law. It was, don't attack women, don't attack children, don't desecrate holy places. So it was trying to say, yes, warfare, it's the Middle Ages, warfare is inevitable, but we should limit how much of it there is and who it hurts. And so what the Pope seems to have thought is, well, instead of having, these men have to fight, they're professional fighters, why not have them fight to protect Christians, to protect Christian churches, to protect Christian places, and to fight against people who are enemies of Christians, rather than have them fight amongst each other. So he apparently gives a speech in in Constance. It's the Council of Constance, I think is where it was, city in France. And we don't know what he said, but whatever he said, it was apparently the greatest speech of all time, because you have
there's
all of
a
these
few
knights, all of these lords who are present.
There's like
and they just come out and they're like, yes, I want to go. Let's go. And you have these rich guys. You have the most powerful lords in Europe.
Like, they don't just say, let's go. What do they say? What do they say?
Deus Volt. God wills
Deus
it,
Volt.
is what they reportedly
Deus
say.
Volt. And of course,
The
Kingdom
word
of
lives
Heaven
on
is
today.
a very accurate film depicting all of
and there's
this.
this myth about
but there
it.
are like 10 different versions of that. Like I've gone to look up the Pope Urban II speech launching the First Crusade, and there's so many different versions of it. It's almost choose your own adventure as to which. But it's kind of like the Patton speech, prior to the great battles in World War II. It's like a General Patton speech, but rallying around the cross and specifically talking about the defense of not just these former Christian lands, but really Jerusalem, the Holy Land, the holy sites. And this ties back to the practice that St. Helena had instituted of pilgrimage to the Holy Land. It's like, hey, remember those Holy Lands that we're all supposed to be making our pilgrimages to? Well, they've been ransacked by infidels, and someone needs to go and save them, and that someone is you, dear friends.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It really is one of the great decentralized outpourings of public enthusiasm ever, because no kings go on the First Crusade. This is not a government endeavor. It is, this guy gives a speech, and they just rapidly, it's just the level of mass public enthusiasm for it is off the charts. So you have nobles who are selling or mortgaging everything they own to try to go to the Holy Land on this pilgrimage. There's no there's no single commander to it. There's different lords, and it ends up being this like campaign by committee like we've never seen before, because they can't agree on who should be in charge. And you have people, like I said, people selling everything they own. There were all these rules that were kind of designed to encourage Christian behavior, where they would say, before you go on crusade, you can't be trying to escape debts. So you have to settle all your debts with any people that you have. If they owe you money, you have to settle up with them. If you owe someone else money, you have to settle up with them. You have to make sure that you go on crusade with a clean conscience. And we have remarkable stories of what people were doing. There was an ordinary man who I believe he'd killed his brother or some family member in an argument. And so he was witnessed where he was like holding the weapons that he had done this with. And he was like, I am going to travel to Jerusalem to lay these weapons at the tomb where Christ rose from the dead as like my penance for what I had done. And again, it's all popular enthusiasm. No king orders this crusade. No one is really ordered to go on this crusade unless they're, a knight who's working directly for someone else who does it. It's all people volunteering to go on this. It never should have succeeded. And if you read the details of it, you really understand why people in the Middle Ages thought that the First Crusade, which took Jerusalem, had to be a miraculous endeavor, because it never should have succeeded in a million years, and yet it does, after several years and after one of the most hard-fought campaigns in human history.